we have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. From the beginning, we have olfactory, then we have optic. You can see where they are from. Olfactory, this is the optic nerves. Then we have oculomotor, then we have trochlear, then we have trigeminal. That is also a big one, control a lot of the facial and our dental region. And we have abducens. So both oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens nerve, they control the movement of the eye. So just one eye, we have optic nerve that is for vision, and for the movement of the eye, we have oculomotor, we have trochlear, and we also have abducens. Okay? And then we have facial nerve. That's also one of the big nerves. They can control most of the facial region. And then we have the vestibular cochlea. That's actually coming from our ear, but they have two functions. One is for balance, and the other is for hearing. So vestibular can send the signal for the position of the head, and cochlear nerves actually transmit the hearing sensory. And then we have glossopharyngeal, that's control the neck region muscle. And then we have one of the most famous nerve called the vagus nerve. It's actually control most of our visual organs. Then we have accessory nerve. It's actually one muscle. It's really look like a spinal nerve coming from the brainstem region. And then we have hypoglossal nerves control our tongue. So the number 3 and number 7 and number 9 and number 10, they also contain some neurons that belong to the parasympathetic nervous system. So you can see from here, some of the nerves that are just pure sensory, and some of the nerves that are pure motor, and some of the nerves that have both sensory and motor functions. So this is just a way to remember all these 12 nerves. And then we have 31 pairs of spinal nerves, 8 from the neck region, we call the cervical nerves, and then 12 from the thoracic region, from our thoracic region, and 5 from lumbar, 5 from sacral, and 1 from coccygeal. So from the C1 to C8, T1 to T12, from L1 to L5, and from S1 to S5, and also the last one is coccygeal. Now we're talking about 2 subdivisions of the peripheral nervous system. One we call somatic, the other is called autonomic. There are many differences from their basic structure, from so-called effector cell, what kind of organs they innervate, and also the function they can elicit. So for somatic nervous systems, they consist of a single neuron between the central nervous system and the skeletal muscle cells. They only innervate skeletal muscle cells. They can only lead to muscle cell excitation. So that's the somatic system. And for autonomic system, they are both efferent systems. They also coming from the central nervous system, but before they reach their peripheral effector organs, they have one synapse between the two. So there are 2 neuron chains with one synapse within a peripheral neuron aggregates region called the ganglia. So we have one part is called a preganglionic neuron and preganglionic fiber, and the second part is postganglionic neuron with postganglionic fiber or axon. Their effector are mostly smooth muscle cells, cardiac muscle cells, glands, GI neurons, but not skeletal muscle cells. Their effect can be either excitatory and inhibitory. And then the autonomic nervous system can be further divided into like parasympathetic division and the sympathetic division. The differences between the two also quite a few. Their origin is different. the origin of the preganglionic neuron of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. For the sympathetic nervous system, the origin of the preganglionic neuron located in the spinal cord from T1 to L2. So there are kind of 14 spinal nerves here. And for parasympathetic, we talk about already the 3rd, 7, 9, and 10 cranial nerves. They carry the parasympathetic fibers as well, and also from the sacral region, sacral spinal cord 2 and 4. The length of the pre- and post-ganglionic fibers also differ. That means the sympathetic neuron, they usually have a pretty short preganglionic fiber. Their synapse located quite close to the spinal cord, and then they have a much long post-ganglionic fiber. On the other hand, the parasympathetic neurons, they can have a pretty long preganglionic fiber, and then usually very close to the effector or just on the effector, they synapse with the post-ganglionic neuron, and so the post-ganglionic fiber usually are quite short. As you can see, the red solid line actually shows the preganglionic neurons of the parasympathetic. You can see they have pretty long preganglionic fibers. They innervate their ganglion, sometimes located very close to the effector organs, and some are more away from the organ, but still not so close to their origin. And then we'll see the blue part from T1 to L2, the preganglionic nerves and their fibers coming from the spinal cord. And then along the spinal cord, they have a chain of ganglia. So most of the preganglion neuron, they synapse this we call the paravertebral chain of ganglia cells. Although preganglionic neuron of the sympathetic nervous system only from central part of the spinal cord, but then the ganglionic chain extend almost as long as all the spinal cord. So they can go upwards and downwards. So they can also form synapses and in other parts of the spinal cord. And they also have what we call the collateral ganglion, more closer to the effector organ, a little bit away from the spinal cord. And then the neurotransmitters used in pre- and post-ganglionic neurons of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system also differ. For sympathetic, the preganglionic neuron, they use acetylcholine. And for postganglionic neuron, they use norepinephrine. But for parasympathetic neurons, both preganglionic neuron and postganglionic neuron, they all use acetylcholine. Of course, there are minor differences as shown in the picture. And in this figure, shown in the lower part of the figure, the sympathetic nervous system, they also innervate the adrenal medulla. The adrenal gland is an endocrine gland, but they have cortical region and the medulla. So the medulla region, they differ from the cortical region. They are not real endocrine organs. Okay, they are, we call that degenerate postganglionic neuron. So they still receive input from the preganglionic neuron from the sympathetic nerve, but their postganglionic neuron, they don't have axon anymore. So they release their product, and mostly this product is epinephrine, but not norepinephrine. And they release the product directly into the extracellular fluid and pick up by plasma. And so they act like hormone. But still, they are part of the sympathetic division. And the last, and also the most important for our physiological standpoint, the physiological effects between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system usually are opposite. Let's give you a big summary figure of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Be aware, this is just show one side of the body. They are actually bilateral. So we just show one side of parasympathetic and one side of the sympathetic. You can see from this figure, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system control most of our organs from the eye, mouth, heart, lung, and all the visual organs.